Welcome back to the Church Law Podcast. My name is Erika Cole, and I'm happy to be your host. You know that we've been in an amazing series talking about the life cycle of church. And so today I'm really excited about this episode topic. We're talking about the thriving, expanding church, and our guest is Brad Hill. He's the Chief Solutions Officer from Gloo. So, Brad is the Chief Solutions Officer at Gloo, the company that recently purchased Church Law and Tax. It's the brand that hosts this podcast. Gloo is building a powerful platform connecting ministry leaders and resources, people, data, and insights, and funding, all of which are designed to help ministries thrive and expand. So, acquiring Church Law and Tax and its vast array of print and digital resources, including churchlawandtax.com, gives Gloo visibility to tens of thousands of churches and church leaders in even more comprehensive ways. And since Gloo is so well positioned to help those same churches build, grow, and expand, it makes sense for Brad to join us today as we tackle this important phase of a church's life cycle. So Brad has been the Chief Solutions Officer at Gloo since 2020, but prior to joining Gloo, he co-founded and led Ministry Brands, and prior to that, he started Site Organic, a company devoted to help churches build their websites. Welcome to the Church Law Podcast, Brad.
Eureka, so good to be with you. Thanks for that intro.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to have you with us. So, you've heard us talk about this life cycle, and I'm grateful that you're also a podcast listener. And it's been very interesting to sort of start the curve right now toward this growing, this expanding function. We've talked about what it looks like to plant a church. We had a pastor on who's also a listener, really in that very early phase, that 1 to 3 years. Then we had another pastor talk about that period where you're sort of a little bit in the messy middle, probably not really middle, but the messy part of that curve where you're in the 4 to 10 year period. And now we're really at this thriving, expanding church, right? And obviously people hit this point at various times in their cycle. But I'm really curious about this whole area of technology and how that plugs into the church's ability to grow, because I think that's a big part of your background and a big part of the work that Gloo does. So I'm going to start off with a bang here in this question. In what ways do you think the church's reluctance to engage in technological advancement actually hurts this thriving, expanding church that we all want to see and experience?
Such a good question. Yeah, and I might I might kind of answer it in a unexpected way. I think that the church has always had a really complicated relationship with technology. This goes way back to the printing press, television, certainly the internet, things like online giving, et cetera. We tend to be sometimes rightfully skeptical because, of course, all of us should be highly guarded that any technological advance or any new tool does not get in the way of the sanctity of the gospel and the scripture that we carry, and the sacred duty that we have to be the bride of Christ and to live out the Great Commission. Great. So that's a important point that should cause us to have some degree of caution and thoughtfulness with any technological advance. The unexpected part, on the other hand, though, is my contention or our contention as we've been working on this for years is that we really aren't talking about technology. What we're talking about is what do we put at the center of how we operate as a church? And I think for a long time, certainly the last couple of generations, what we've been placing at the center, and honestly, Eureka, what we celebrate are things like numerical growth, whether that's attendance, giving, certain types of engagement measures. And let me say, those are good things to measure. Turns out it's in the Bible. Like Acts chapter 2 talks all about church growth and salvations and such. So we're not discounting that. However, if that's your scoreboard and that's your scoreboard only, it can create some really difficult patterns. And I love that you guys are going through this sort of like life cycle process because the deeper a church gets into its life cycle, and if it's measuring those institutional kind of growth metrics, what we fail to do in that case is we get away from putting the growth of each person at the center of what we're doing. And it's a 180-degree mindset shift, to think about what does it really mean to make disciples? What does it mean to create journeys where people are growing at different paces and different ways? And so bringing it all back together, we live now in a year and an age when technology actually creates some opportunities for us to personalize and to measure things that we've never been able to do before. But the mistake, I think, is that if we think of it as just, oh, there's a new app, there's a new technology, we kind of fire up that technology box in our brain and we get really skeptical. And instead, my hope is that, especially now with some of the things that are on the horizon, we can fire up the, hey, let me put people back at the center of my ministry part of our brains. And man, if there's any tools out there that help me do that, I'm all in. So that's kind of my soapbox, if you will, for our relationship with technology. At Glue, we say relationship catalyzes growth.
That's so
Um,
good.
and so, we want to do anything possible to use the tools God's given us to put the relationship at the center.
So this is what my brain summed up what you said, which was so, so good. I summed it up in this way. Rather than focused on growing the engine of the building, right, of the numbers, of sort of the data points, really growing the heart of the people toward Christ, putting that at the center.
Yeah, I mean, statisticians and others have this concept of lead metrics and lag metrics, right? And I think for so long, what we've been measuring are the lag metrics that come at sort of the very end. And we've had tactics, by the way, in the last couple of decades that really worked to spur growth and giving and attendance and whatnot. Those tactics are no longer working, the way they once did. And there's some cultural and sociological reasons why, but the lead metrics, I think, is exactly what you're saying. It's how do we get back to the hearts, the people that we're serving, and understand that really our role as a church is to equip people to grow and equip people to champion each other's growth. Not all the growth is going to happen inside the four walls for 1 hour on Sunday. And
Yeah.
so if we orient our mindset that way, we actually get the lag metrics, attendance and giving as a result.
So you asked the question, and in much the way my husband interacts with me, right? I ask him a question, then he asks me a question. I'm going to then ask you the question that you raised, which is how then do we, when we talk about the thriving, expanding church, how do we grow the hearts of the people toward the things of God?
Well, we're in the middle of a number of activities right now that we're seeing producing great promise. I think I would start by saying what we measure really matters. Um, and so it's not been possible, really. I remember decades ago talking to some people about the Great Commission, and I would say, well, how are you doing in making disciples? And they're like, well, you can't really measure that. That's getting a little too clinical. Like you just kind of know, or it's a Holy Spirit thing. And I fully understand the heart behind that. However, I would say, and we would say at Glue and with our good friends and partners at the Barna Group and other organizations, there actually are some empirical ways to know how the people are doing. We've been working with the Harvard Center for Human Flourishing on a set of 7 dimensions of human flourishing. And so there we actually have a really empirical way now to see on a piece of paper, on a dashboard, how a person is doing or how a whole church full of people are doing. And that has a really transformative effect when you, as a pastor, you can look at this and say, my people are doing pretty well in the dimension of spiritual flourishing. But what I'm also seeing is that the relationships might be struggling, or their sense of calling, what we call vocation, might be lower than I'd like to see, or their sense of contentment in life, mental health. So all these dimensions kind of paint a picture. And I always love to talk to pastors, like if you knew that about your people, what might that change about your preaching and your programs and the classes? So again, it's back to the same concept. If we put the person at the center, that can actually drive the decisions we make as leaders about where we put resources, where we invest, and even like how we telegraph to our pews what matters to our church. If all they ever hear is bring a friend and invite someone and don't forget to give, that can start to feel a little bit, I'm just here to serve the church. And when the church instead says, hey, we're here for your growth, or another phrase I love is how you're doing is how we're doing. So, as you all grow, that's our barometer. Such a fundamental
That's so
shift
good.
in how people feel like their relationship is with their body.
That's so good. I mean, I'm feeling that inside, right? I was raised in the church. I always share, my mom was my Sunday school teacher. My dad was the head trustee of our church. I think that my parents have been at their church for well over 50 years. And we just had the blessing of um, burying, not the blessing of burying, but she was 91 years old, the matriarch of our family, and she was a member of her church for 72 years.
Wow.
And we just don't see that anymore. We don't really see that kind of commitment. I think on both sides of the ball, really, it's football season, so I'm talking about both sides of the ball. But what you're really sharing as churches, sort of being the leader, being the emblem to reflect of this nature of caring about the people in the pews. I really feel so strongly about that. I love how you shared that. I want to sort of come back into some of the work that Gloo is doing. So you just came off of this huge initiative of AI in the church. And my understanding is that Gloo sees this as a way to put the church in a position to be leaders when it comes to this powerful tool. So, can you share more and also help me understand how this links into the heart of Gloo to really bring people to the forefront?
Yes. So we talked about how the church has this complicated relationship with technology, right? And there's been just these big, momentous shifts, like the ones I mentioned, printing press, television, internet, and some others. We see AI right now as, without trying to get too hyperbolic, I mean, certainly one of the most significant technology advances of our generation, of our lifetimes. Arguably, it could be like historic proportion. And AI, we think of it as technology, and it is, but it is honestly more of a cultural shift coming than a technology shift. The problem is, in the moment, as we're recording this, Eureka, most of the information us normal people get is going to be from the news, from social media, whatever sources we look to, and those outlets specialize in fear mongering and you know kind of big headlines and clickbait. So a lot of us have probably a pretty tough relationship or a pretty tough perception maybe of AI. Maybe we've played with ChatGPT some, but a lot of people have questions. We've done research for the last year and a half to ask people, especially concerned Christians, what do you think about AI and what are your fears? What are your hopes? A lot of people come back and really wonder what's feeding this whole technology, whose sources are behind this. When I ask a question of ChatGPT, who's really answering? Pastors and church leaders are even more kind of concerned or skeptical because they understand that currently the tools we have with AI, especially these generative chatbots, have been fed by a very, I'll be generous and say ecumenical, really a very kind of pluralistic set of sources. So we cannot and should not trust that these tools are going to answer the deep questions of life or help us with things like sermons or kids curriculum or small group questions from a decidedly biblical Christian lens, because they are also sourcing from the world's religions and atheistic sources and all sorts of things. So we're at a point where the technology is amazing, but like all technology, it can and does have bias. And so the question is how can we use AI redemptively? and what would need to be true for us to trust it. Because it does have the promise of helping us actually personalize ministry. It has a promise of supporting couples, relationships. It can help us with administrative tasks throughout the church. It could help us scour legal records to come up with recommendations of how to move forward in an issue. Now, and I bet that statement just kind of sent like tingles up a spine of a lawyer, of a legal professional, because you're like, wait, what's this AI thing going to do, that I've spent years training for? That's exactly how pastors feel when you ask it to handle matters of theology. So we have a possibility, but also risk right now with AI. So what Glue's been doing is we've been really focusing on a multidimensional set of initiatives around. We know that all other areas of culture, medicine, law, business, media, arts are using AI today. It's in every one of our smartphones. Um, the church needs to have that superpower to basically serve and advance just like the rest of the world does. So we're convening top experts across theology and technology and government and the rest. We are um, working on matters of trust principles. We've convened sort of a council that's really, grappling with, because we're behind on legislation so far. So we're grappling with some of the matters that would help congregants and pastors trust the technology. And then kind of the fun, shiny part is we're actually looking at tools. Like, what are some fun tools and useful applications that use AI redemptively? And it turns out, circling back to our last conversation, this event we just had was called the AI in the Church Hackathon. And we invited teams from all over the world to come to Boulder, Colorado, our headquarters. And we asked them to spend a weekend building tools around the dimensions of human flourishing and the dimensions of thriving churches. Basically, use AI to build some tool that's going to support relationships, or that's going to help people grow in the area of finances or mental health or what have you. And we had, I mean, if you could have been there, so inspiring to see. I mean, God is innovating in ways most of us don't even see right now. But we had college students come building apps to deal with mental health on campus. We had ministries using AI to detect uh, adult film addictions in people and help treat those things. Our grand prize winner was an app that helped pastors translate their sermons real time into any language. So your church can now have a Spanish congregation or a Korean ministry if you want. And I mean, not just like the audio,
So
but
exciting.
lip sync the video so it looks like your pastor is speaking Korean. I mean, it's
That's so exciting.
so we're
No, I
excited.
really
Yeah,
love this. I love this so, so much. So first of all, I'm the church attorney, right? So I am in two arenas. Um, feet firmly planted in both, right? So first in the church, which we've already established tends to be a late adapter, or I should say adopter of technology, and then in the law, which lags significantly behind technology. However, I'm a big fan of technology in general because I think that it is meant to be a tool to serve humanity, right? Not the other way around. Not that we are so deeply into it. So um, one of the examples that you mentioned is the ability of AI to synthesize large chunks of information, even in the law, right? And maybe spit out
right.
some possible solutions. And so this is just an example of how it's a tool, but we can't allow it to lead us. We have to, much like what Paul said about our bodies, sort of like discipline, bring it into subjection, right? We've got to do that with all the tools that we utilize, I believe, as a body. So there is an unfortunate incident where attorneys filed a brief with the court and they used AI to write the thing. And also, AI actually came up with some very compelling cases, and this was submitted to the court, and opposing counsel is looking at this, and the judge is looking at this like, where are these cases? And unfortunately, they made up the cases, like and so unfortunately, the attorneys didn't do their due diligence to fact check. And so it just became a whole mess. Obviously, the attorneys were sanctioned. of course, this negatively impacted their clients, which is what you never want to have. Like, that's the first rule. So I think it's just about the wisdom of how we make use of the tools. And I love that in the hackathon, as you described, really we have the ability to do creative things that we probably wouldn't have come up with. I probably wouldn't have come up with. So when you say a pastor could in real time have his sermon translated into various languages and almost have the ability to look like you're speaking these languages, to be able to share the gospel in a more vast way. Like, how is that not a win?
That's right. And at the same time, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so encouraging what's happening right now. But as pastors, um, what I would say to encourage anyone listening from our research, your congregants don't expect you to be an expert in technology. However, they are asking right now for their pastors to help them navigate this, just like all of us are. For example, as parents, my own kids have had, stern lectures at school about, ChatGPT being banned, or we're going to accuse you of cheating. So in all stations of life right now, there's just a great need for what I call discernment. And the more this technology grows, the more important it's going to be for us to be grounded in the word. And as a side note, another big project we're doing at Gloo is really building what's called a large language model, which is the underlying engine that drives so many of these tools we're all fascinated by right now. But we're building what's called a Christian aligned large language model. We actually have an acronym CALM, CALLM. And to do it, we are partnering with world-class ministries across the board, including groups like Church Law and Tax, Christianity Today, Right Now Media, and we are currently ingesting large volumes of Christian-aligned biblical and extra-biblical content across all domains so that we can equip pastors with tools that actually do align with principles, theologies, and worldviews that we ascribe to, and then take advantage of the tools on top that are now emerging. So we're very bullish about that, and you'll see some additional announcements coming soon from Gloo. And all this, of course, is just designed to help the church thrive in what proves to be an AI-powered age coming up ahead of us.
That's pretty powerful. And I also think about, I don't know if you connect with other organizations like UMI, et cetera, other organizations that serve the church broadly, so that a part of what my husband's in IT, right? And one of the things that IT people often say is garbage in, garbage out. So that we are making sure that we're including the voices of the church in a reasonably broad way as well, right? So that we are having some cultural breadth in what we provide also in these tools, because I think that's a big part of what we want to make sure we are providing to the world, because this is a worldwide tool. So I'm so grateful that we were able to have this conversation. There's so many more questions that I would love to have asked. So maybe we'll need to schedule a part two, or plan to have part two of this discussion, because I've absolutely enjoyed it. But as we are landing the plane, when you think about what you want to share as a company and the mark that you want to leave on the church, like, what do you see as you move forward in this space as a company? What final words would you want to share in that regard?
Well, I might reflect your words from a moment ago, that technology can serve to basically advance the principles we all espouse as a church, right? So the more that we're thinking about how do I use a tool to better serve this person and not the other way around, how not that technology exists to make us subservient, but how can technology help us advance? We got to keep that straight. We have to maintain kind of our mission. And as I said at the top, the church's job more than anything else is to equip all of us to grow. But honestly, if you look in the New Testament, the church was equipping the saints to do the hands and feet, do the work of ministry. Technology gives us ways now to advance that more rapidly, more broadly across languages, et cetera. So my exhortation for pastors is see this technology as a win, see it as a tool to help you. But always be clear about, our mission to support the relationship and use these things redemptively. And at Glue, our hope is that we can connect you to all the resources, the tools, the data, the funding that's needed for the church to thrive, hopefully for, years to come until Christ returns. So we're delighted to be in this spot, and let not your heart be troubled. I mean, AI
Mhm.
has some concerns right now, but there's so much to be bullish about. And as we like to say, God is not surprised by AI or any technology. It's here for us to figure out how to use and leverage.
Amen. And I also think about the fact that God is a creator. I mean, in the beginning, God created, right? So he is creator
Yes.
God. And I think he's inspired us to be in his image in that way. So thank you so much, Brad, for being with us. We're excited about the work of Glue, and we're excited for this conversation. And we appreciate you so much. Blessings to you and all that you do.
Thank you so much.